My name is Alice, and curiosity has always been a part of who I am. From the time I was little, I found myself drawn to the unknown, constantly questioning and seeking answers about life and the people around me. Even as a young girl, I was never content with just accepting things as they were. I wanted to understand them, to dig deeper and uncover the layers that made people and situations what they were. In school, I stood out as someone who was confident and social, the type of girl who could easily make friends with anyone. Boys, in particular, seemed to gravitate toward me, and I welcomed their attention, not out of vanity, but out of curiosity. What made them tick? What made one boy blush while another laughed? Why did some get nervous and others grow bold? These were the questions that fascinated me, and I found myself testing their boundaries, experimenting to see how they'd respond. It wasn't just about teasing or playing games, it was my way of learning about people. I liked to observe their reactions, how their voices changed, how their eyes lit up or shifted away, and how their body language spoke volumes even when their words didn't. I was studying them, piecing together the puzzle of human emotions and behavior. My friends used to laugh and say I could charm anyone, but for me, it wasn't about charm, it was about connection, about understanding what made people open up and reveal their true selves. I didn't just want surface-level friendships, I wanted to know what lay beneath the smiles and polite conversations. Even as I grew older, that part of me never changed. Life, to me, was a series of experiments, each moment an opportunity to learn something new about myself and the people around me. It wasn't just a way of living, it was who I was. I remember one particular day in school when my curiosity got the better of me. My body was yearning for a connection, something more physical. It was a feeling I couldn't shake off, and I decided to experiment with my male friends. I wasn't exactly shy about it either. I flirted and teased until I found the one who matched my energy. It felt empowering, knowing I could pick and choose who I wanted to be close to. I had always been confident and outgoing, the type of girl who didn't shy away from speaking her mind. I was the friend who dared to say things others only thought about. That day, though, I felt different. My body seemed to be sending signals, telling me I wanted something more than the usual jokes and conversations. I wanted to feel a connection, something closer and more real. At first, I ignored the feeling, thinking it would pass, but as the day went on, it only grew stronger. I caught myself watching the boys in my class more than usual, noticing little things about them, the way one of them laughed, how another brushed his hair out of his face, or the way some of them would glance at me when they thought I wasn't looking. It was like I had discovered a new world, and I couldn't help but explore it. By the time school ended, I had made up my mind. I wanted to see what would happen if I let my curiosity guide me. I wasn't shy about it either. I started by testing the waters, using little smiles and playful jokes to see who would respond. Some of the boys were awkward, fumbling over their words or blushing when I looked at them. Others were more confident, meeting my gaze and matching my energy. I remember feeling a rush of excitement, like I had the power to control the situation. It was thrilling to see how they reacted, each one revealing a little more about themselves. I wasn't just playing a game, I was learning. I was discovering what it meant to connect with someone in a way that was more than just friendship. That day changed something in me. It wasn't just about the connection I had made, it was about understanding myself in a way I hadn't before. It was the start of a journey, one that would lead me to places I never expected. Fast forward to my adult years, and that same curiosity never left me. It wasn't something I could switch off, it was part of who I was. I had moved to a quiet neighborhood by then, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names and routines. It was peaceful, but also predictable, the sort of town where gossip spread fast and secrets had no place to hide. People like to keep things simple, but my mind was always searching for something deeper, something more interesting beneath the surface. One of my neighbors was a man named Mr. Samuel. He lived just a few houses away in a modest home with a neatly trimmed lawn and a flower bed that he took great care of. Mr. Samuel was 65 years old, a widower who had been living alone for years. To everyone else, he was simply the helpful old man on the street. He was the kind of neighbor who would lend you a tool without hesitation or offer to fix a squeaky gate just because he had the time. I saw him often, whether it was in his yard tending to his flowers or walking to the local store. He always had a calm, steady presence, like he had all the time in the world. There was nothing flashy about him. He wore simple clothes and spoke in a gentle tone, but there was something about him that caught my attention. At first, I couldn't pinpoint what it was. Maybe it was the way he carried himself, with quiet confidence and grace, or perhaps it was the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, as though he had lived through 1,000 stories and still found joy in the little things. He had a way of making you feel at ease, like you could tell him anything and he would never judge. To the rest of the neighborhood, Mr. Samuel was just the nice old man who kept to himself. But to me, he was different. There was an air of mystery about him, something that made me want to know more. I found myself noticing the way he moved, the way he spoke, and even the little habits he had, like how he always wiped his hands on a cloth before shaking someone's hand, or how he hummed softly to himself while working in his garden. The more I observed him, the more curious I became. I wondered what his life had been like, what stories he carried with him, and what it was like for him to live alone. Did he ever feel lonely? Did he miss his wife? These questions swirled in my mind, and I couldn't help but feel drawn to him. One day, as I was unloading groceries from my car, he appeared at the edge of my driveway. "Need a hand with that?" he asked, his voice as calm and steady as ever. I smiled and nodded, grateful for the help. As he carried a bag into the house, I couldn't help but notice the strength in his hands and the kindness in his eyes. We talked for a while after that, nothing too personal, just the usual neighborhood small talk. But even in those simple conversations, I felt a connection, like there was more to him than met the eye. From that day on, I began to see him differently. He wasn't just my neighbor anymore. He was a puzzle, a story waiting to be told, and I couldn't wait to uncover every piece. At first, I didn't think much about him. He was just my neighbor, someone I greeted politely and occasionally chatted with over the fence. But as time went on, I started to notice the way he looked at me. It wasn't inappropriate, but there was a spark in his eyes, a curiosity that mirrored my own. It made me wonder what kind of man he truly was beneath the surface. One evening, as I sat alone in my living room, I thought about him. I wondered if his life was lonely, if he ever missed having someone to share it with. That thought led to another, and soon I found myself imagining what it would be like to spend time with him, to get to know him on a deeper level. The idea seemed absurd at first, but the more I thought about it, the more it intrigued me. The opportunity came sooner than I expected, catching me completely off guard. It was one of those stormy nights where the rain seemed endless, drumming against the windows with an almost hypnotic rhythm. The wind howled, making the trees outside sway like they were performing some eerie dance. The power had gone out across the neighborhood, plunging everything into darkness. I sat alone in my living room, a single candle flickering weakly on the table beside me. The stillness in the house felt heavier than usual, and I couldn't shake the sense of restlessness growing inside me. I tried to distract myself, flipping through an old magazine, but the dim light made it hard to focus. I leaned back on the couch, listening to the sound of the rain and wondering how everyone else on the street was spending the night.
And then came the knock. It startled me at first, breaking through the quiet like a sudden clap of thunder. I froze for a moment, my heart beating faster. Who could it be at this hour, in this weather? I grabbed the candle, its small flame flickering with every step, and made my way to the door. When I opened it, there he was, Mr. Samuel, standing on my porch, holding a flashlight that cast long shadows across the walls. His expression was one of concern, his forehead slightly creased as he looked at me. He was wearing a simple raincoat, droplets of water clinging to its surface, and his hair was damp from the storm. "Good evening, Alice," he said, his voice steady but warm. "I wanted to check on you. These blackouts can be unsettling." For a moment, I just stood there, caught off guard by his presence. The sight of him felt oddly comforting, like a beacon in the storm. "Oh, thank you, Mr. Samuel," I finally managed to say, stepping aside to let him in. He shook off the rain and stepped into the living room, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Do you have enough candles?" he asked, glancing around. I nodded. "Just this one for now. I didn't expect the power to be out this long." He smiled, the kind of smile that made you feel like everything would be okay. "Good thing I brought a spare," he said, pulling another candle from his pocket and lighting it with a match he had tucked away. The room immediately felt brighter, cozier, as the soft glow illuminated his face. As he set the new candle on the table, I realized how glad I was that he had come. The storm outside seemed less intimidating with him there, and the restless feeling I'd had earlier began to fade. "Thank you," I said, again, more sincerely. He waved it off, sitting down in the armchair across from me. No need to thank me. It's what neighbors do, right? But the way he looked at me then, his eyes lingering just a moment longer than usual, made me wonder if there was more to it than that. And as the night continued to pour outside, I felt the night take on a new kind of tension, one that I wasn't sure I was ready for, but that I couldn't ignore. We sat together in the dim light of his flashlight, talking about everything and nothing. His voice was calm and soothing, and I found myself opening up to him in a way I hadn't expected. He listened intently, his eyes never leaving mine, and for the first time I saw him as more than just a neighbor. As the night went on, something shifted between us. Maybe it was the intimacy of the moment, or maybe it was the way he looked at me, but I felt drawn to him in a way I couldn't explain. When he finally stood to leave, I surprised myself by asking him to stay. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "If you're sure," he said softly. What happened that night was beyond anything I could have anticipated, yet it felt oddly natural, like the pieces of a puzzle finally falling into place. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside, the room was quiet except for the steady rhythm of our breaths. Mr. Samuel had a way about him that made everything feel calm, even when my heart was racing. It started with a simple gesture, a hand on my shoulder, firm yet gentle, as if asking for permission without words. His touch carried a kind of reassurance, a silent promise that I wasn't alone in this moment. I didn't pull away. Instead, I let myself lean into it, curiosity and trust guiding me more than anything. He was attentive, almost as if he could read my mind. Every movement felt deliberate and thoughtful, like he had spent years perfecting the art of understanding what someone else needed. His hands were strong but careful, and every touch seemed to carry an unspoken question, "Is this okay?" I found myself answering with my actions, leaning closer, letting the moment unfold without hesitation. What surprised me the most was his confidence. There was no fumbling or awkwardness, no hesitation in his movements. He acted with a quiet assurance of someone who had lived through years of experience, someone who had learned not just the physical aspects of connection, but the emotional ones too. It wasn't just about what he did, it was how he made me feel, seen, valued, and cared for. I remember the way he looked at me, his eyes steady and warm, like he had been waiting for this moment as long as I had, though neither of us had ever spoken about it. There was no need for words. Everything we felt was conveyed in the way he held me, in the way his fingers brushed against mine, in the way his presence filled the room. Time seemed to slow down as the storm outside continued to drum against the windows. Every sound, every sensation became heightened, etched into my memory. It wasn't rushed or overwhelming, it was gentle and natural, as if this was exactly how it was meant to be. When it was over, we sat there in the glow of the candles, the silence between us saying more than any words could. I felt a strange mix of emotions, gratitude, wonder, and a sense of calm that I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't just about what had happened, it was about the connection we had shared, something that felt deeper than I could explain. And as I looked at him, his expression soft and content, I couldn't help but feel that this was a moment I would carry with me forever. The next morning, I woke up with a mixture of emotions. The sunlight streaming through my curtains felt intrusive, as if it had caught me in the middle of something forbidden. Mr. Samuel was gone, and the house was quiet again, but my mind was anything but still. I replayed the events of the night over and over in my head. How had this happened? How had I let it? And yet, despite the questions, I didn't feel regret. Instead, I felt something else: curiosity, excitement, and a strange sense of calm that I hadn't felt in a long time. Later that day, as I went about my routine, I found myself stealing glances at his house. Would he come over again? Would things be different now? I didn't have to wonder for long. That evening, as I watered the plants in my small garden, he appeared at the fence, his usual smile in place. "Good evening, Alice," he said, his voice warm but casual, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. I smiled back, trying to mask the nervous flutter in my chest. "Good evening, Mr. Samuel. How are you?" "I'm doing well," he said. There was a pause, and then he added, "I hope I didn't overstep last night." His words caught me off guard, but his tone was sincere. I shook my head quickly. "No, not at all. I'm glad you stayed." He nodded, his expression unreadable. "If you ever need anything, you know where to find me." With that, he walked back to his house, leaving me standing there with 1,000 unspoken thoughts. Over the next few days, we fell into a strange rhythm. We didn't talk about what had happened, but there was an unspoken understanding between us. He would stop by occasionally, bringing small gifts like freshly baked bread or vegetables from his garden. Each time, he stayed a little longer, our conversations growing deeper and more personal. It wasn't long before the nights started to feel empty without him. The quiet hours seemed louder, and the shadows in my home felt colder when he wasn't there. On the evenings he didn't come over, I caught myself glancing at the clock, wondering if he'd knock on the door. I missed the sound of his voice, the calm steadiness he brought into my space, and the way he could make me feel like I was the only person in the world who truly mattered. When he did come over, it was as if the outside world disappeared. The storms, the blackouts, the mundane stresses of the day, all of it faded into the background. It was just us, sharing moments that felt timeless. One particular evening stands out in my memory. We were sitting together in the warm, flickering glow of a candle, the soft light dancing across the walls. The air was thick with unspoken words, and for a while we just sat in comfortable silence. Then, out of nowhere, he spoke, his voice carrying a weight I hadn't heard before. "She was the love of my life," he said, his eyes fixed on the flame. His tone was soft, but filled with a depth of emotion that made my chest tighten. I could see the pain in his face, the memories he was reliving. It was a side of him I hadn't seen before, vulnerable, raw, and deeply human. Without thinking, I reached out and placed my hand gently over his. His skin was warm, his fingers steady beneath mine. "I'm glad we found each other," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. "So am I," he replied, his words filled with sincerity. From that moment, our connection deepened in ways I hadn't anticipated. What had started as a curious experiment, a passing fascination, had grown into something profound. I had never imagined feeling this way about someone like him, someone older, someone who carried the weight of years and experiences I could only begin to understand. But with him, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. Safe to be myself, safe to explore the depths of my emotions, and safe in the knowledge that he truly saw me for who I was. It wasn't about his age, his past, or even his wisdom. It was the way he made me feel, like I mattered in a way I never had before.
Every day with him brought something new, something unexpected. He wasn't just a companion or a fleeting fascination, he was becoming a part of me, and I couldn't imagine my nights or my life without him anymore.